Hi, this is Antoine Garth from Garthastro.com and Garthastro Healing Arts. And today we're going to talk about how to interpret a birth chart and where to start when we do so. Now, we're taking into account that you should already know what the zodiac signs mean. You should know what the planets mean. You should know what the aspects entail. You should know what the houses mean. Okay, so, or I mean, at least have some kind of basic understanding of that before looking at this, because now we're talking about how to interpret, not necessarily how to learn astrology. So, in my opinion, this is one of the best places to start. This is where to start. Angular, succedent, cadent. And we're basically talking about where the planets are, in which type of houses the planets are posited or placed, and what kind of difference it makes when they are in either angular, succedent, or cadent houses. This material comes from Guido Bonatti, who is an astrologer from the 13th century, and his 146 considerations, which were retitled in the 17th century, Soul of the Astrologer, or Anima Astrologiae. And so we've been looking at this particular, rather, I have been looking at this particular text during my weekly workshop on Zoom every Sunday at noon. And it is a free weekly workshop that all are welcome to. And we are now looking at Bonatti's 146 considerations. So with that in mind, the consideration that brings me to why I think we should start with either angular and succedent or cadent houses starts here. The fourth consideration is of the causes of things helping matters so they come to be and are perfected, and those which prohibit matters so they do not come to be, nor are they perfected. Let's stop right there. So what this fourth consideration says is, when you're looking to see if anything will take place, now he wasn't just talking about natal astrology. That's the most important thing to understand here. He was talking also about horary astrology, which is the art of answering a specific question using astrology, and electional astrology, which is the art of choosing an auspicious time either to begin something or to do something. So what he's saying here is, let's say an excellent example of a horary question is, am I able to get pregnant? So the cause of things helping matters so that they come to be and are perfected, and those which prohibit matters so that they do not come to be, nor are they perfected, would be me and being able to have children, or me and not being able to have children. And these particular things, these particular considerations or considerations within the consideration, the main consideration, contribute to whether or not these things will happen. So when we're dealing with a natal chart, we're not necessarily dealing with a specific question, but there will be certain things that come up out of the texture that are either coming to be and being perfected, or are not coming to be and are not being perfected, or are being destroyed. And so these are the things to kind of look for. So the very first thing he says right here is, of which the first is the arrival or advancement of things. And we're going to stick with that term, advancement. And the second is deterioration or worsening. And we're going to use another term for that. We're going to call that retreat. So he's basically saying the first thing that you think about or that you consider when you want to know if something is going to happen or not is you look at whether the planets are in a state of advancement or in a state of deterioration or retreat. We'll start with advancement. So simply put, a planet is in a state of advancement if it is in either an angular or succedent house. Now, the angular houses are 1, 4, 7, and 10. The succedent houses are 2, 5, 8, and 11. Now, think about the angular houses. These are all the houses that everybody is the most concerned about. So I spend a lot of time on Reddit, and I am one of the moderators of one of the astrology subreddits. And 90% of the questions are about love, which is the seventh, or love and relationships, which is the seventh house, and career, which is the 10th. And then we also tend to get things about family and about self. Well, everything is about self, obviously, but we tend to get mostly these two angles are consistently being asked about. Right? So basically, these are the cardinal points of the chart, right? The first house is east, the fourth house is north, the seventh house is west, the 10th house is south, right? So these are the four cardinal points, and they are the four cardinal points of life: me and my body, the family of origin from which I come, my personal relationships or intimate relationships or partnerships, and then how I am known in the world, right? So that's, so not only then are they important life areas, but they are also areas in which if a planet is located in any of them, they will be in a state of advancement. And so what advances? If a planet is in 1, 4, 7, and 10, or 2, 5, 8, and 11, especially the 1, 4, 7, and 10, what advances is the planet's personal signification. So if we're talking about something like Venus, who's the ruler of love and sex and beauty and pleasure, those are her natural significations. That means if she's in an angle, she's in one of these four or one of these four, that means her specific significations can flourish or can be advanced or will be advanced or pushed to the fore or put into the public eye, so to speak. Not necessarily into the public eye like making them famous, but it will be a public part of the person's nature. And then also the houses that are ruled by that planet. So if Venus rules the second house and the seventh house, that means that financial matters and wealth and love and intimacy matters, or intimacy and partnership matters, those two areas of life will also be advanced. So once again, if something is in a state of advancement, which means it's either in an angular house, 1, 4, 7, or 10, or a succedent house, 2, 5, 8, or 11, its specific signification. So Jupiter, for instance, is wealth and fertility. Mars is anger and contention. Mercury is reading and writing and speech, things of that nature. So those things will be advanced forward. Make sense? And then also then the significations that correspond to the houses that they rule will also be put forward. So for instance, once again, let's say we have Venus in the first house and she rules the second and the seventh. Then we will have not just the Venusian aspect of her specific significations, but we will also have the second and the seventh house. And we're going to look at a chart and see some of this, because it'll be very descriptive once we actually have a chart and look at it. But just understand that you're looking at not only what the planet is and what they mean in and of themselves, but you're also looking at what houses they rule, because those areas of life are going to be pushed forward. So for planets to be in a state of advancement, they need to be in houses 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, or 11. Okay, so retreat is the opposite of advance. Right? So to advance, think of an army. If an army is advancing, it's on the offensive, it's moving forward. If an army is in a state of retreat, then it is leaving in the face of a threat, generally, right? So that doesn't necessarily imply a threat in this particular meaning, but just to use our particular example here. So when a planet is in retreat or flight, then it is in down here, it's called the third domicile, but it's the third domicile of each quarter. So there are 12 houses, and that means there are 4 quarters, right? 4 times 3 is 12. So there are 4 quarters of each house. And so the third domicile of each quarter is a Cadent house. So that would be 3, 6, 9, and 12. Now, the Cadent houses generally are considered relatively, or 2 of them specifically, are considered actually quite malefic. And the 2 that are considered malefic are the 6th and the 12th house. And the main reason is because the 6th and the 12th house do not make any kind of Ptolemaic or major aspect to the ascendant. And so if we think about cadent, and the cadent houses are the furthest away from the angular houses. And so what we're really dealing with is light and how much light is available to a planet on some level. And so 6 and 12, having no kind of aspect to the ascendant, are considered two of the considered dark houses and two of the worst houses. So as a result, then what we're looking at is planets that are in 1 or 2, 4 or 5, 7 or 8, 9 or 7 or 8, 10 or 11. Those planets are all in a state of advancement. And planets that are in cadent houses, like this 3, 6, 9, and 12, those planets are in a state of retreat. And so they are weakened by their cadency, is how this would be seen in the past. Now, I want to look at a chart that I think gives us a very interesting example of this thing. So, and it's especially gives us a very interesting example because of the context of the question that was posed. This person posted their chart onto Reddit and asked, does my chart reflect my physical deformities? And so we can use that question to see if the issues related to that question are either in a state of advancement, meaning angular or succedent, or if they are in a state of retreat. Okay, so the main significators for her question, okay, her question is, does my chart reflect my physical deformities? The main significators for her chart are the first house and the sun. So the first house, the cusp of which is Leo, and the sun, who is its ruler, which represent the person's body. So that's our first significator. Representing the body is the first house and the ruler of the first house, which is the sun. Representing the illness is the sixth house and the ruler of the sixth. So the cusp of the sixth house is Capricorn, and Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn. Here he is retrograde in Gemini. And then the moon is co-ruler in all things. That's a very important rule of ancient traditional astrology, is that the moon is essentially, because she is the mediatrix and she transmits the celestial realm to the earthly realm, she is important in all things. So we would look to her anyway. Also, the moon represents the harmony of the body to the soul, with the soul, how comfortable in your skin you feel. So the moon will be our third significator here. Okay, so what is in a state of advancement? Advancement means that we're looking at something in 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, or 11, right? And which of the three, right? We're looking for the sun, we're looking for Saturn, we're looking for the moon. Saturn is in the 11th house, putting him in a state of advancement. The moon is right on the cusp of the 7th house, putting her in a very strong state of advancement. The sun, representing the body, don't forget, is in the 3rd house, putting the sun in a state of retreat. That means that the significators for the illness, which is Saturn, and the moon, who becomes the agent of Saturn because she is an Aquarius, which is also his sign, both of those planets are in advancement. They are in a state of advancement. Not only are they in a state of advancement, if we come over here to this little box, we see that the sun is at 22 degrees of Libra. We see the moon is at 21 degrees of Aquarius. So we know that signs that are in the same element are able to trine each other. And so here we have what would be called an applying trine. Okay, so an applying aspect happens when a faster planet is in a lower degree than a slower planet and is going to an aspect. And that's what's happening here. The moon is the fastest planet. It's at 21 degrees of Aquarius. It's applying to the trine of the sun. Now, when we think about, excuse me, trines, we think people have a tendency to think good and bad when we think of sextile and trines and squares and oppositions. So we tend to think of, oh, it's a good aspect, sextile and trine. Oh, it's a bad aspect, square and opposition. However, the original terminology is easy and hard, which means that bad things can be easy and good things can be hard, and good things can be easy and bad things can be hard. Right? So there's infinite variation to how things can actually express, meaning that just because these planets are in trine, and also, these planets are in trine, because these planets are in trine, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a good thing. So Saturn is at 29 degrees of Gemini, which would essentially put these three planets in what would be called a grand trine. All three elements are being represented here, or all three qualities of the element are being represented here. So the cardinal, the fixed, and the mutable. And these three planets are aspecting each other, or rather, the sun and the moon are applying to the trine of Saturn. Now, Saturn is the slowest planet, so both of those other planets can apply to it. So as a result, that means that then there's an easy flow between illness and the body. Right? So not only is there a flow between the illness itself and the body, but the agent of the illness, right? The moon is the transmitter, and she's specifically transmitting Saturn in this particular chart. So the moon as transmitter can also transmit the illness to the sun. So when I saw that Capricorn was there, I wondered if there was a problem with the knees. When I saw that Saturn was in Gemini, I wondered if there was a problem with the shoulders and the arms and the hands. And the fact also that the moon was in Aquarius, I wondered if the legs or ankles were problematic. And sure enough, then also, I wondered if, since Saturn was what we were talking about, if there were skin problems or problems with bones or problems with teeth. This person has a massive underbite, so the jaw is deformed. Their teeth, as a result, the teeth are deformed. They have a deformed shoulder, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the arms are of a different length. And there are rashes. This person also deals with different types of rashes. So what I think is really interesting about this chart is that the indicators for the illness, like I said, the Saturn and the moon who's representing Saturn, who's being an agent for Saturn, those are an advancement. And the planet that represents the person and their body and their vitality and health, and the sun naturally is the ruler of vitality, is not in a state of advancement. It's in a state of retreat. Not only is it in a state of retreat, it is in a state of fall, because the sun is in Libra, and Libra is the fall of the sun. Not only that, but with this trine, both the moon and the sun are giving Saturn, the ruler of the sixth, so the ruler of the infirmity and the detriment to the body, they're giving him some form of his own dignity, because the moon is in the domicile of Saturn and the sun is in the exaltation of Saturn. So this really, what shall we say, this really impedes the sun. It puts it at a major disadvantage and puts these others at a very strong one. So this is just a way of kind of looking. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to, well, let's go back for a second. You're going to want to go to your chart and look to see what planets are in a state of advancement, meaning what planets are in 1, 4, 7, or 10, 2, 5, 8, or 11, and what planets are in a state of retreat, which would mean that they are in 3, 6, 9, and 12. And what that will tell you, especially if you look like I just have, to see what houses are being ruled. So if we just did this from the very generic view, we would say, okay, the moon rules the 12th house, so that's a self-undoing, that's already something inimical to the person. Saturn rules the 6th and the 7th. So Saturn rules the 6th. We'd already talked about that. So those things are definitely being pushed forward. They are being advanced. The body is in retreat. So that is not being pushed forward. So its ability to thrive and to push forward and to fight against these things is weakened as a result of its position. Okay, so that is where to start. Look for the planets that are angular, succedent, and cadent.